Hey there, Power Parents. Welcome to the conversation. I can't wait to talk to Dave here, but we have with us the managing partner of Dave Sanderson Speaks, and I bet you know what his name is. Dave Sanderson.
Yeah.
Hey there, welcome to the conversation, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today.
Yay. All right, so let's start this whole conversation off
Yep.
with your story. Okay, we got to have a frame of reference here, and this is all about parenting and entrepreneurship. So tell me your once upon a time story. How did you become a parent and an entrepreneur at the same time?
Well, it's interesting because when I became a parent for the first time, I was working for a corporation. So I was a sales manager for a company. So for the first number of years, it was basically me doing the 9 to 5 or nine to nine kind of job. But after the plane crash is when I made the choice and made the decision, and my wife gave me permission to make that decision to become an entrepreneur. And that changed everything because what really changed for you, Mary, was that after the plane crash, I realized my priorities were really messed up, that I was focusing so much on my business and what I was doing with Tony Robbins and all that, and my family was getting left behind. So when I became an entrepreneur, my major focus was I was going to shift my priorities to make sure I worked around my family instead of my family working around me. And that's when I became really successful, and my company started growing. And when I started doing growing, so I started refocusing my time.
So, of course, we can't just glide over this whole plane crash. Those two words together, we don't usually hear good things when those two words are put together.
Yep.
And also, we've heard two other words that are really showing us good things, which is Tony Robbins. So,
Yep.
so take me through more detail in that, please,
Yep.
sir.
So I was the last passenger off the plane that crashed in the Hudson River in 2009, called the Miracle on the Hudson.
Hmm.
It wasn't by design. I wasn't supposed to be on the plane. I was scheduled on the 5 o'clock flight, but I was working in a distribution center that day with my job. And we started at 5 o'clock in the morning because distribution centers open up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we wanted to be there in the action time. So that's when we got done at 10, and that's how I got on the plane. And as we know the story, the movie's coming out, Sully. That fortunately for all of us, we all survived, and it was they called it the Miracle on the Hudson because it was a miracle the way everything came together. So that's part of it. But as that was going on, and as I was working, I was the head of security for a gentleman named Tony Robbins. And for 10 years, I was either on his team, assistant head of security, and then became head of security. And I traveled the world with him and supported him and his mission to helping people, and by osmosis and just being around him. And as important, if not more importantly, people he was hanging with, because he hangs around with some very interesting folks. You get to learn a lot of things being around people. And so I've learned a lot of my strategies and training came from being with Tony and supporting his cause.
Wow. Boy, those two things put together, it sounds like not necessarily a perfect storm, but a perfect opportunity.
It was a perfect opportunity, but like I mentioned before, what I realized right after the plane crashes, I was spending a lot of my time doing that because I was modeling my dad, who, and my dad, he was a World War II person, and you take care of your family first, and you do whatever you can to take care of your family. So he was gone 3, 4 nights a week, and so my mom was a strong person in our family. So I was doing the same thing. So I was providing. We didn't lack for anything financially, but I wasn't there for a lot of things. And I started realizing that I missed a lot of things just because I was focused on this achieving instead of focusing on developing my family. And that's when becoming an entrepreneur really changed everything for me.
Wow. Okay, so before when that plane crashed,
Right.
and I've heard the story, I've seen documentaries, obviously the film's coming out. I can't even imagine. Well, I can imagine the fear, but I can't imagine what went through your head. And each of those passengers probably had very different realizations that came from that. And whether they acted on those realizations or not is another story. But you did. So take me from the minutes before anything was going on, there was any hint that it was bad, that was something bad was going to
Yep.
happen, and your mindset then, and then take me through that particular situation and what clicked and changed, what happened, where in that process did you then have a complete change in your mindset, like you just
That's a
described?
perfect question. So it was about 70 seconds, 65, 70 seconds after we took off is when I heard the explosion. And I looked out the window. It's in seat 15A, so looked out the window, saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing. I knew something had happened, but I fly 100 times a year. I saw a plane lost an engine. So I felt him banking, so I thought he was just going back to LaGuardia. but that's when no one knew at that point it happened on the left side, happened on the right side. So one of the part of the miracle a lot of people don't understand and hear about is these birds hit simultaneously. And if it would have been boom, boom, I think it would have been a different reaction. We heard boom, so everybody thought, okay, the other side, no big deal. But when he said his famous words, "This is your captain, brace for impact," I think everybody on that plane that I've talked to knew it was pretty dire at that point. I mean, it's you're heading, you just barely cleared the George Washington Bridge. You're heading right into the river, and you hear those words, and about 65 seconds later is when we crash into the river, and it was a hard hit. He estimates he hit between 100, 120 miles an hour. He does. I'm sure he's not quite sure what it was, but it was a hard hit. So when I came back up in my seat, it sort of whiplashed me up. I saw light coming through the window, but I felt water coming up too because the plane was stripped. So all of a sudden you felt water coming up your legs and the plane is sinking. And I was towards the back of the plane. But what really changed for me is still things are just moving in fast motion then, right? Things are just happening. But when it was my time to get out, my initial thought process was get to the aisle, get up, get out. When I got to the aisle, that's when everything changed for me. So my mom, who had passed away in 1997, said something to me in my head that she said to me when I was just a kid that's popped into my head. It was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And I told someone earlier, I said, she gave me the choice of what was the right thing for me. It wasn't like, do this. It was like, do the right thing. So I grew up in playing on teams, athletics, sports, Boy Scouts. It was always about the guys. So that's why I went back to the plane and make sure, because I was fine. I could move. I didn't know anybody else could because it was dark on the back of the plane. So you had to go. I went back just to make sure everybody could get out. And then when everybody got out, I started making my way up. But we're waist deep in the water on a sinking plane. So I was like, I got to get out of here fast. So I went out to the right side on 10F, and I looked out. There was no room on the wing or the boat for me. So that picture everybody sees with people standing on the wings, I was hanging out the door. And I was hanging out the door and waist deep in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes until it was my turn to leave.
Wow. So your mindset before was take care of your family, do what you got to do in your work so you can provide for your family.
Right.
Right?
Most definitely.
Then you're in this plane and this whole thing happens, and it happens relatively quickly.
6 minutes.
Yeah. So
Yep.
60 seconds after takeoff, 6 minutes later, and you went through a complete transformation within that 6 minutes.
I did.
Now, you talked about your mom and the impact she said, do the right thing.
Right.
But what was the change? What was it that went through your mind that made you change that whole mindset from do what you have to do to make money to take care of your family to put your family first and then put the money second?
Perfect question. Perfect segue. So you fast forward later that night when I'm in the hospital. I had hypothermia. So two of us were in the hospital, Barry and I. He broke his sternum. I had hypothermia. And that night is when I got a phone call about midnight from Tony Robbins. And he was the only one that called me that night. My company didn't call me. And my company didn't call my wife. So, at that point, I'm still sort of hazy, right? I'm right in the middle of a lot of things going on. But I got back to Charlotte the next day, and as soon as I got back to Charlotte, and when I was with two of my daughters, and I didn't know if they knew I was in a plane crash. So I went by the office in these sweats, right? And the first question I was asked is, are you going to Michigan next week, right? And it was like, okay, that's what I realized. So you want to know the moment? That was the moment. Now I realize I'm just a number.
Yeah.
They would have put somebody else in New York or Michigan that next day.
Right.
And all of a sudden I realized, you know what? My priorities are ass backwards, excuse my language.
Yes.
I need to focus on my family, focus on me, instead of focusing on making another $1 million for somebody else. And that's what changed.
Amen. Yes.
Yep.
But it took that, didn't it? It
Yep.
took that impact to you personally and your family,
Right.
and the absolute
Yeah.
just ignoring that from the company and the people with whom you spent your time and energy.
Right. I made the effort to be with, and I was up there on business for.
Yeah.
And that's another thing a lot of people understand. I was up there for business for these people,
Right.
and making money and doing what I was supposed to do. And I think what really happened when I took two of my eldest and my third daughter went with me, and because my wife did not want me to drive home alone, and that was just a very smart move. I should have been with nobody alone at that point.
Yeah.
But they witnessed this, and they saw me do this, and then I think that's when it triggered.
Yeah. So then, all right, you had Tony Robbins call you, the only person, the person you knew who was an entrepreneur that does put his family first. He does do a lot of the things that we all talk about.
Walks his talk. He walks his talk.
Yeah. So he's the one that called you.
Yep.
You had worked for him. You saw that. The people who he hung out with, you got the call from your company that all they cared about was you being on the next plane to go to the next
Right.
gig.
Right.
And your family was the only people, they were the only people that were actually there with you.
Right.
So
Most
now
definitely.
you go and you have this realization. It happens. What's your next baby step to making that actual change and actually making your family priority?
So what happened? And I'll go back to Tony again. I was still head of security for Tony, and we were having conversations, and he was coaching me about how to do the media and stuff because I'd never been around media. So he was coaching me on things. But he had an event going on in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I called him. I said, "Listen, I'll be at the event. I'll support you at the event. But by the way, I'll probably have more media there than you."
Yeah.
And he said he and I are laughing. And I'm like, I'm serious, right?
Right.
So I show up at CBS is there ready for do this, right? And so he and I talked. And he kept every time I saw him telling me, when are you going to do something for yourself? You cannot work for the man and be totally free. He kept telling me this over and over for 10 years, right in my face. I kept making excuses, right? So now he's like, this is the time to make your move.
Yeah.
You got to make your move. But still, I had health insurance and everything else I had to deal with. So it took me a little time to figure it out. But when we had that conversation, and in Chicago a few months later, he said, "Listen, I want to find another security director because you got to make this move. I'm going to push you out to do this."
Yeah.
And he pushed me to do it, and that's when I made the move. And then my wife finally supported it. After I got the health insurance and everything lined up, and all of a sudden I had a business. And I tell people, one of the interesting about my business, and I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur, is I could drive revenue. I didn't know how to do the other stuff, like collections and things like that. Yeah. So it was a learning experience for me. But I was driving revenue.
Yeah. So, but take me to that first step. I mean, when I hear that, and I got to tell you, I just heard an interview with Tony Robbins where he was interviewed by Tim Ferriss again the second time, and that was every single time I hear that guy. Tony, he blows me away every single time. So I can't even imagine being around him more than those few times. My poor brain would explode. But anyway. So I can understand that he had to push you. He had to kick you out and say, "That's it. Yeah. You're done. You're doing this. Right. There's no other option. I don't care if you're ready or not. You're ready."
Right.
So what did you do? Okay, I understand your wife wasn't quite there because she's not used to it. She's used to the steady paycheck. I get it. I got a husband like that. Okay, got that.
Yep.
So, but what did you do? What was the first step in actually driving that revenue? And how did you come up with a product?
So I had the product speaking, and I was developing the speaking, and so I was getting a lot of opportunities to speak and driving that revenue. But the first thing I did was hire a personal assistant, and I needed somebody to be there to help me. Be my buffer, the person who could say no, the person to keep me in line, push me out there, handle the things so I could do the things that I did best. Because Tony always talked to me about leverage. You got to leverage, you got to leverage, you got to leverage. Well, the first thing I did is I leveraged to Tammy, who was my first personal assistant. That was the first thing that I did. Then I had a little business. I was driving revenue, but then I had none of the products. But fortunately for me, later that year, I was a part of a book which I wrote a chapter for. So I was a contributing author, whatever they call it, for that book. So I had at least the product, and then all of a sudden it started blooming and blooming, and then I have other things that all of a sudden, and now I had 2 personal assistants and another person, and all of a sudden this thing started growing. And I was learning how to be an entrepreneur because you have to have that mindset. It's like, I'll try something. If it fails, I'll try something else. Mm-hmm. And we're in corporate life. They don't like that. They like certainty. Mm-hmm. See, and I'm in my life now where I'm going down the path of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And so I had to give certainty to people who are uncertain, which is my wife and everybody else. So I had to live the certainty, and I had to walk the talk.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Now take me into how in the world. Okay, so we've got it. You're probably still working at this time, right?
I am.
And you're building this on the side, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you have even less time to be with your family.
Right.
So how in the world does this fit into your whole idea of putting family first?
So the good question. So what I did while all this was going on, I actually got my family's calendar and put it in my calendar first. So even with companies. So one of the most frustrating things for me was when I go to a basketball game for my daughter or a volleyball game or something, and all of a sudden they want to do a conference call, right? Well, I would do the conference call from the stands.
The game, right.
Put the Bluetooth. I'll just do it. It says, you know what? It's my value set is, okay, I'm here now. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's 6:30 at night, it's past work time. I know you got people on the West Coast, but this is my time now. Right. So what I did was I took my calendar every month and put my family events in first, and more circled around it. And that's how I did it. And sometimes, like on Sundays when I was speaking a lot, sometimes I'd miss a Sunday here and there. Um, and so that was a little tough. But I never missed an engagement for my family. I never missed engagement for my company until I made the shift out. And then I made the shift out. I was like, okay, now I can schedule how I want to schedule.
Yes. It wasn't that amazing freedom? Didn't
Yep.
you just feel such
Oh,
amazing relief and freedom?
the day I did that, first, it was a little. My wife was very nervous. I know she's still probably nervous. But yes, it was. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, where I could focus on really, making sure I was there for my family and working when I wanted to work,
Hmm.
and how I wanted to work. And this business is cyclical.
Yeah.
Right now August is pretty down, but September with the movie coming out,
Yeah. You're going to fly.
so
Yeah.
to go fly. So so you got to schedule around that. So
Yes.
it all came down to scheduling and focusing on chunking what's important.
And I'm sure, I'm absolutely sure that you are being consulted and counseled and mentored to really expand your product offering and find out really what your audience wants from you, what you can give them beyond the book or the speaking, so that you can fill those dips in
Right.
the cycle with other opportunities.
Right.
And I mean, that's really what it's about. So we just, I mean, I have not met an entrepreneur yet who just stays with one product and that's the only product they give for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Now, I have to take that back. My father-in-law pretty much is that. He's a tax accountant. He does
He
taxes.
figured it out.
He's
He
done the
figured it out.
same thing. He knows exactly what his clients need, and he does that every year, the same thing.
Right.
But most of us, anything we do online, we don't do it that way. We
Right.
iterate, we change, we grow, we adapt, and we respond to the changing environment. So I know that's where you're headed. So I have no question
Yep.
you're gonna be fine, because you're gonna be able to adapt it to the next thing and the next level that you need to be at, for your business and your customers.
Well, the podcasting is a tremendous thing it opened up for me, and understanding the power of podcasting and getting my word out in an auditory manner. It's you're right, exactly. You have to grow, and it's all about the growth cycle now, right? And so that's where I'm at right now.
Fantastic. So take us through now that and when was it that you actually quit your job and now you're completely an entrepreneur?
February 1st, 2014 was
Okay.
the official first date of my company. Yes.
Got it. And so since then, you have, and now we haven't really talked about your kids.
Yeah.
Before we started
Right.
recording, we talked about your kids, but tell the power parents. And I have to tell you, the reason we call ourselves power parents is because when you raise kids, you get a set of skills that people who are not parents really don't have. And those skills are exactly transferable in business. We need them to create success in business, just like we needed them to create success in our parenting. So I talk about ourselves as being power parents because we already have the power if we're a parent.
Yep.
Business is nothing next to potty training, right?
That's
Okay.
exactly
so-
right.
Or like we're talking about,
Yes.
girlfriends and boyfriends
Yes.
in college.
Yeah, a whole different game. Exactly right.
So
Yeah.
take that now for me, and in that time frame, give me a typical day. How does your day go as an entrepreneur with? And first off, before I
Yeah.
get there, tell us about your kids.
So I've got 4 children. My eldest, Chelsea, is 25. So she's out. She's graduated. She's gainfully employed, and she's out. And the only thing she's left on me is we've got a mobile phone issue we're working with. So we've got her squared away. My second daughter, Colleen, is 23. She's out, and she's got a job now, and we're doing the same thing, sort of weeding her off of some things. My third one, Courtney, is going to college next week. And my fourth one, Chance, is he's going to be a freshman in high school. So we got about every 4 or 5 years apart. We got them, but I agree. I mean, my typical day is I get up before everybody else. I'm a morning person. So, and I've learned if I don't get my energy going early, I'm not going to have any energy during the day. So I work out immediately when I get up. That's when I do it. At 5:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock, I just get that done because everybody else's time comes first. Because like I mentioned, my family, I try to work with my family. So when my daughter was going to high school and now my son's going to high school, I would take them to school. And because one thing I want to make sure is they got to school. After that, I don't know what's going on. And candidly, there's other issues that they can deal with. But now at least I know they're at school.
Right.
So I always made a point, and we made a point to do that. And that's what I do. So that's why I get up early and do my stuff. So I take them to get them to school first. And then I'm already up and going. So by 8 o'clock, 8:15, I'm in my day. And so, I always work administratively initially just to get this stuff out of the way because that way I'm more creative a little later in the morning where then I can start working on product development or marketing or things that need to get done. So, and blogging and all the stuff we got to do these days.
Right.
So, so now you're wrapping back time to make sure they get picked up from school. Now the eldest, of course, had her own car towards the end of the high school career. I didn't have to worry about that. But my son, we make sure we pick him up so we can do a quick debrief on what happened that day. And of course, he doesn't want to talk. That's okay. At least he sees me first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He sees a parent. I think one of the problems this country's having now is they don't have too many latchkey kids come home to nothing.
Yes.
So I'm passionate about either myself or my wife if I'm out of town, picking him up, make sure someone is there for he visually sees. Now then again, when he gets home, there's a whole other world to deal with.
Right.
But I don't deal with that. I go back to work and do my stuff. But then what I did, and when I became an entrepreneur, which really changed a lot of things, I had my office in our house, and with all the kids running around, it was getting pretty it was pretty hairy, a lot of fronts. So about 75 feet away from the house, I built this office where I'm in right now, away from the house. And I did that for two reasons. Number one, I needed the quiet. But second, when I'm done, I'm done. I can walk out it's like my office. I'm out of my office. I want to go to the house. I don't even take my mobile phone with me.
Yeah.
So I'm there for them now. And then again, we're all doing our different things. But at least I'm in the house. I don't have my phone. I don't have my iPad. I don't have my computer, anything. So I'm there. I'm present. So whatever's going to happen that night happens that night, So the kids see me that way now. So at least they see morning, evening, and I'm there, and we start all over again.
Very, very different from attending a basketball game with a conference call in one ear, right?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And Friday nights at 7:00, I'm going to the high school football game, not worrying about a conference call.
Yes.
So I'm there around my kids and seeing how they act.
Yes.
So.
It really, so many people bounce this word around called balance, right? How you balance it all. And balance is bull as far as I'm concerned. It's all about choices.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make choices,
right.
And you've made a very hard choice. You've made a very strong. There's a boundary, and that's what I was going to talk about with the difference between where you worked before and now you're working for yourself. You created those boundaries, and yes, sometimes we have to be adaptable and move the boundary a little bit,
right.
But we don't cross them. We don't. If you really are truly going to put your family first, you have to have those boundaries and not cross them.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So kudos to you, because I know that's a difficult thing to do, to leave your phone.
People have to put yourself in position to win, right? But a lot of people don't do that, and I see a lot of people working in their homes, and candidly, the kids are running around all this stuff. I don't know how they're doing it. So now, because when I delineate, I'm out, right? And my wife knows that. So, when she knows I'm home, then she can start unloading on me on what's going on, which is fine. So, you got to have boundaries. And the way I learned that was I was with Tony in Fiji, and we were doing we were out there having fun, and he had this thing called a Swiss ball, the big Swiss balls.
Yeah.
I couldn't even sit on the Swiss ball. I was falling off the Swiss ball. He kept telling me, you have no balance. You're all over the place. It's a metaphor for your life.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, I bought myself a Swiss ball, and every day I sit on the Swiss ball and get balance before I do anything else.
Yeah.
That word balance, maybe you may not believe it, but I think I center myself on the Swiss ball before I do anything in my first workout, because that gets me centered for the day.
Exactly. And I agree 100% in that. The way I look at it is so many people associate balance also with multitasking. Yeah. And, when you're balancing, you're just on that pivot point. You can't live sitting on that Swiss ball.
Yep. Nope.
At that pivot point. That's not living. That's trying to balance on the Swiss ball. You have to then move and go do work. And then you do the work. You don't balance your work and your family, because that's just that one point. You don't live in that. You have to move. So
that's
yes,
right.
I agree 100%. And yes, it's totally true. It's a metaphor. But when you actually have to do things, you're not balancing. You're choosing.
That's right. Everything in life's a choice. That's what I tell my kids. Everything in life's a choice.
Yep.
And my wife hates me when I say that, because when I have to do this, I say it's a choice.
That's right.
You can choose to do or not. There's consequences to both.
That's right.
So you have to value the consequence, and that's it. My dad taught me that years ago when I was a kid, and I thought I was bulletproof. And every choice has a consequence, and that was one of the things he kept telling me when I was a kid. It stuck in my brain.
Yeah. And it is true. You've lived it, right?
Yep.
You look at going back to that plane. Going back to the back to see if anybody was there and making sure everyone got out first was a choice. And the consequence of it was you were the last one out. There was no more room on the wing. You had hypothermia.
Yep.
Right? But you're still here, thank God.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly. And that's the way I look. I could have gone back and something could have happened to me.
That's right.
But I made a choice based on my value set, and everybody in that plane did. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from that day is don't judge other people because you don't know their backstory, don't know where they're coming from. They may have a whole different story behind them.
Yeah.
And it helped me be less judgmental on people too. That was a big learning for me.
Thank you so much for saying that because it is so true. We don't know what everyone else has got. We haven't walked in their shoes. So anytime we judge someone, really, we're kind of making fools of ourselves because we don't know what they've gone through. We have
You don't know what fears they have. You don't know what they have. You don't know if they have a kid or they have something they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So that was a great learning experience for me.
Wow. Okay, so you haven't really been doing the whole parenting and entrepreneur thing for a long time, and your kids are older, so it's a little bit different. You're not going to necessarily speak to the mom who's sitting at home with a toddler trying to build a business, but we do have certain skills that are absolutely necessary in order to make this a success. Can you think about the skills you have as a parent, the things that you have to deal with, the skills, and how they translate to the skills you've now developed as an entrepreneur? And which of those do you think are the same and very important?
Good question, because I think I made the move to entrepreneurship from corporate to entrepreneur, which a lot of people now are evaluating that. How do I get out of corporate to entrepreneur instead of starting out like I said, a mommy with a baby? But I think the skill set that I think translates to me the best when I made the move was it's from parenting to entrepreneurship to even corporate work was anticipation. And because when you're a mom or a dad, all of a sudden you see patterns that are going on in your family, and you can start anticipating maybe what may or may not happen next. Which to me in business, the skill that I think a lot of people value is the skill to anticipate what that next move may be.
Right.
And so I think the skill set of anticipation is one that really translates. I write about this in my book, Moments Matter. That translates from business to parenting to business, because I think it's a skill set that everybody, if they develop it, then they don't get all emotional. They know what's going to happen or could happen. They can plan for it instead of all of a sudden hitting them like a plane crash.
Exactly.
Yep.
Too many easy analogies here. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't imagine 100 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour hitting the water. That's not an easy crash. Think about being in a car and getting in a crash at 100 miles an hour. That's not an easy thing. So
I talked to somebody from NASCAR who was on the plane, and they said it's like hitting the wall sideways at Daytona like 110 miles an hour, right? And it's like that jarring. So it's but yes. But everybody's got their own personal plane crash in life, and that's the other one I'll talk about in the plane crash.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Tell me what you're talking about.
Every parent's got it, and every person's got it. But there's a moment in your life, everybody's life, I believe, that they go face their own personal plane crash, which means they're going to have their own health scare. They're going to have a car crash, a fire, a flood. Something's going to happen in that moment in life. Is going to be traumatic, and a lot of it comes with your family. You have a child's in a dire situation, or they're choking on a pencil or something like that, right? And same thing in business. You get to that point where all of a sudden everything's dried up. What are you going to do? And you got 25 people you employ. That's that personal plane crash. That's the moment that you got you step up and make the choices that you need to make. And that's why that's why I tell you about the skill about anticipation. You can anticipate something happening. That's why my mom and dad tell kids not to go around water and run around pools. Yeah, right. Because they're afraid to go fall in, right? And then I got to save you. Then oh my goodness, I got too many things I got to decide on. Just don't do it.
Yeah, right.
Just don't do it, right? So that's why I talk about the personal plane crash and the skill of anticipation.
So that is fantastic, Dave. I got to tell you, because that leads to so many other opportunities to talk. But we can't go into all of them, obviously, in this short period of time on the podcast. But I can imagine that if that's your direction, if that's what you talk to people about, then you must have some tools or some kind of roadmap or some type of ability to help them through that. So once they have that plane crash, that's one thing. Yeah. You come to the realization, like I asked you about your coming out of the plane, what do you do with it? Right. What's the first thing you do with that realization? And I got to tell you a little bit about me. I've had a couple of those plane crashes, quite a few of them. But the ones most recent that made me become an entrepreneur is when I was pregnant with my second son. I was 8 months pregnant, and I fell and broke both my legs. So I'm sitting in casts up to the knee, and I have to go through labor and delivery of a baby. and I can't even walk on my own. I can't even walk. I can't go to the bathroom. I can't, my whole life was like, okay, you're done. That's it. You are laying down and that's it. And I was a corporate hard driver. And guess what? The company found somebody else to do my job pretty quick.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, same thing. I get it. And that was the huge realization that, oh, you know what? I'm pretty dispensable in that company, but I am absolutely indispensable to these kids.
Right.
Done. All right, what are you going to do next? And then you have to plan out the steps. You have to start taking those baby steps. It's life. Yes, you are absolutely right. So are you helping people take those next steps, or what are you doing with that information?
So that's a great segue. First, congratulations. Because one of the beliefs I have is there shouldn't be any unemployment in this country because everybody can do something. But that's another topic for another day. How I help people, and I help a lot right now, especially with military, fire, and police, a lot of those kind of folks. And it really stemmed from an article that was written about me and for me about AARP magazine about 4 years ago. And it was called Jolt. And it was about someone did a study about me and a couple other people, and it's called post-traumatic growth syndrome, PTGS. And, it's really the contrast of PTSD. Right. Why do some people go in depression whereas other people really grow and flourish? So they took me as a case study and wrote this article about me. So to answer your question, this is what I talk to people about. How do you grow from a traumatic experience? And a lot of it comes down, and I give your audience one quick thing. So what question do you ask yourself? And the people who go into a depressed state are the ones who are usually stacking this thing, why does this happen to me? Why does this happen to me? Why does this happen to me? Stacking it so deep they can never get out of it. Right. Where people who grow from it say, how can I add even more value and enjoy the process? Right. See, that second part's a big difference where a lot of people can add value, but they're not enjoying what they're doing. Right. If you can do that and enjoy the process, all of a sudden you're growing and flourishing and you're helping other people. And that's how I help people right now. And whether I'm doing a workshop as I do for companies or I'm speaking on stage or all of a sudden someone freaks out when I'm speaking and they want to talk to me right in the middle of my talk, I'm all jumbled up now. I got to get the answer really quick. So that's how I do it.
Fantastic. So Power Parents, I hope you've gotten some amazing ideas from this because of the fact that we've all, there are a lot of different words we use to describe this idea that you're talking about. And many of us who are parents and entrepreneurs, a lot of us started being an entrepreneur at the time we became parents because that was our jolt. That was our time when we went, oh my gosh, I am going to be responsible for this other human being. I got to do something about that. And that's when we usually become an entrepreneur and want to have flexibility and all that kind of stuff. So we call that the baby effect.
Right.
Okay.
I call it threshold. You hit that threshold, right? You got to make that push across.
That's it. It's the tipping point. It's the baby effect. It's the threshold. It's the jolt. It's the whatever you want to call it. But it's all the same. So people, you're not as unique in that sense. It feels totally unique, but it is universal. It's human. So act on it. And ask yourself, what an awesome question to ask yourself. Are you saying the pity side, going, why is this always happening to me? Boo-hoo, oh my goodness, what is it about me? What's going on? Why is the universe against me? All those negative things? Or are you going to look at it and go, all right, here's an opportunity. What am I going to do with it? And you push through it and you try and create joy in your life beyond that. What an amazing thing. So with those people, talk about another good segue. With those people who are sitting there going, gosh, I really want to do that. All right, Dave. Yeah, you're making sense. I got my idea, or I'm in business and I've hit this wall. So I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm going to push and I'm going to do something different. What advice would you give that person? What should they do next?
So here's what I recommend to people because I did it and I didn't even know I did it until it came and hit me across the face. And it happened to me when I was young and when I was still working for a company. And I found that mentor. I found that person who was in the 60s who he could compress all his decades of learning and give it to me, and I could use it right then. And his name was Bill. He wore a flannel shirt and drove a pickup truck. And I didn't know anything about Bill until I found out Bill owned 80 movie theaters in North and South Carolina. It was like the Sam Walton of Charlotte. Right. And so I had the Sam Walton of Charlotte giving me advice. Yeah. So the record I tell people is you find a mentor, you find somebody who's walked the talk, and at that point you take them and you do exactly what they say because success leaves clues.
Yes.
Right. And if you model what they do exactly, just don't question it. Just do what they tell you exactly. You'll get the outcome. It's the people who take the advice and want to do something different. All of a sudden, they're not getting the outcome. Well, this doesn't work.
Right.
No, there's advice. There's proven success leaves clues.
Yes.
So find the mentor, get the network going, get everything start building up around you so you have a support system, because I didn't have a support system. At least now I've got a support system, and so I got 2 or 3 people that I can call and lean on and say, you know what, I'm having a bad day. Give me some feedback. Give me feedback, right? Because all of us are getting to that point where we're going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I said, Jesus didn't have every day of his life wasn't a good day. He had some bad days. Yeah. He had one real bad day, right? What did Jesus do? He went out with his folks, right?
Yeah, right.
Talked to his folks, right? The guy got his team together. So okay, so everybody's got to find that team. So.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yep. All right. That brings me back to, there was another episode we just had recently, episode number 130, Power Parents. I believe it's 130. So parententrepreneurssuccess.com/PEP130. And that's exactly what I talk about. Find that mentor, because otherwise you're just all on your own out there. You're just all by, and not very many of us just build a cabin out in the middle of Montana and live all by ourselves without any contact with the outside world. Kind of reminds me of a guy named Unabomber a long time ago, right?
Yep.
So that's not the majority of us. We live in communities. So find your community, find your mentor, find someone exactly. It sounds like, I'm sorry, Power Parents, it sounds like this has been scripted, but it hasn't been. It's only because I'm talking to someone that is preaching to the choir. Thank you.
Well, sometimes you got to hear things 4 or 5 or 6 times before they hit something.
That's right.
Like in sales, you got to ask somebody 5 times before something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This has been really a true pleasure, and it has flown by. Talking about flying, it has flown by, the time that we've been talking. But the amount of really actionable advice and inspiration you have given us, I'm so grateful that you were able to chat with me today. I can't wait. Can you give us an idea of where you're speaking in the next year, or if there's something specific you're working on that we might be able to partake of, and obviously where we can find you online and
I appreciate that. Well, if you go on my website, DaveSandersonSpeaks.com, my calendar's out there, and I would open this up to your audience. If you go out to my calendar, you say I'm going to be in your locality, email me on my website. I'll give you a personal invite to be my guest. I would love to have you come and be my guest at an event. So that's my invitation to you. I do have my book, Moments Matters, out now, and that's going really well. We're going to put the audio version out here pretty soon on Audible, and my next book will be coming out next year. But with the movie coming out, Sully, which is premiering on September 9th. There's a lot of excitement around that. So I think that we're going to have some things working around that, and you'll be seeing some things out. I can't divulge right now because I've got non-disclosures coming out, non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
But between that and I also have my video product, which would be in alignment with my book. Because one of the things I talk about in my book is about sensory acuity and the ability to be able to communicate visually, auditory, kinesthetically with people.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to do that, I got to walk my talk. So the video product's going to be out there with the book, and we're going to do the audio. So however modality you want to live in, you'll be able to get my information.
Fantastic. Wow. I can't wait. Power Parents, I'm going to be all over this because I agree 100% with everything Dave's been talking about. And, it's been a blast chatting with you. I can't wait to see how everything goes, and maybe after it all gets done and you're on the other side of it, and there are other things that have spawned from it and other lessons, we might want to bring you on back and see what's been going on.
I love to come back with you. I really enjoyed this time. It's been a great conversation. And please check me out on Facebook under Dave Sanderson Speaks, because I'll be putting stuff out about that. And my weekly blog goes out on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I would love for you to check my weekly blog, because that's those wisdoms that I come out with that all of a sudden it's inspire me, and hopefully it'll inspire you.